Every life has a soundtrack. Join me as we invite guests to share their journey through music, one song at a time. 10 moments, 10 memories. I'm your host, Sean, and welcome to 10 Tracks.
Are you ready?
Welcome to 10 Tracks. My guest today is Reeya Banerjee. Reeya is a singer, songwriter, and storyteller based in Whippany, New Jersey.
That's it. Yep, Whippany.
Oh, wow. Okay.
I know, very wacky name.
By way of the Hudson Valley, Brooklyn, and Chattanooga, her music is deeply personal, weaving stories of grief, healing, and self-discovery into rich emotional songs. Drawing her inspiration from the Beatles, Bruce Springsteen, U2, and 90s power pop. I want to know more about that. She blends literary depth with a cinematic sense of storytelling. A Pushcart Prize nominee and staff writer for Story Screen Presents, Reeya's latest album, This Place, is a journey through the geography of identity, where each city she's called home carries its own emotional truth. We definitely have to go through that because that's just alone, the cities connected to this is going to be something. Reeya, welcome to 10 Tracks.
Hi, thank you for having me.
Where are you in the world today?
Right now, I'm at home in Whippany, wacky Whippany, New Jersey.
Now, I should have checked this, but I didn't. Where is Whippany in comparison to New Jersey?
It is for anybody out there who's listening who knows New Jersey. It's kind of near Morristown. I'm about, just to contextualize, this might be a better way to put it. I'm about an hour outside of New York City. I've got friends in Brooklyn who I visit and I play music with, and it takes me about an hour to drive from here to Brooklyn. So it's still fully considered the New York City metropolitan area. I would say pretty much I work from home, but pretty much any of my neighbors who actually have to go into an office are going in and working in the city. So
Yeah. But tell me about growing up. Where did you grow up?
Primarily I grew up in San Francisco, in the San Francisco Bay Area. I was there from when I was 9 to 18 when I went to college. But prior, I was born in Washington, D.C. I lived there till I was 6. And then we moved to Chicago, lived there till I was 9. And then we moved to San Francisco, stayed there through college. And then I came to New York, to the Hudson Valley for college. And then I stuck around for a good 20 years. And then after the pandemic, me and my partner, he got a job upstate, a little further upstate New York. So we moved up near Albany. We were there for a couple of years. And then he got a job down south in Chattanooga, Tennessee. And we were there for a year. That was all of last year. It was a very strange detour, after 20 years in New York for both of us. I work from home. I'm portable. So it was, as long as I have internet, they were like, yeah, fine, work wherever you want. And then, after a year down there, it was a beautiful place, but there's a lot of culture shock. The South is very different from New York. And so there was a little bit of that, homesickness. All our family and friends are up here. And then, not to go too far down this particular wormhole, but I'm sure you know what's going on politically in the United States right now. And the South is a very scary place to be in. And the way I would put it is, so my partner Tim, he is a white man. I am a woman of color. He woke up the day after the election last November and said, I no longer feel safe living down here. And if I don't feel safe living down here, then you definitely are not safe down here. So the mission for us was to get back to the Northeast. We would have taken anything. We would have taken Boston. We would have taken Portland, Maine. We would have anything to kind of get us back into the zone. Got very lucky that he found a job here in New Jersey that is this close to, we're also about an hour away from our family in the Hudson Valley. So we're an hour away from family, an hour away from friends. So again, the universe was looking out for us there. So we were able to come home, which is nice.
Yeah.
And be around people who are sane and not scary. So,
So what came first? Were you writing and creating from there, or did you already have like an interest in music and singing and songwriting?
um, that's a great question. So I've always been a writer, like a creative writer, mostly creative nonfiction, memoir. That's something that I have been doing pretty much my whole life. When I was in high school, I was I was a theater kid. I acted, and I wrote plays. In college, I studied film. But I didn't I did learn film editing, as a part of that. I had an internship with a documentary film company, but I was focused more, academically on film theory. So a lot of what I was, studying was, kind of the text of a film. Not just a screenplay, but just sort of what a film is telling you from a storytelling point of view. So that storytelling has kind of always been, a lens through which I look at the world. In terms of music, when I was a child, I took piano lessons. I did not particularly care for those piano lessons. My parents wanted me in the piano lesson. My mother in particular wanted me in piano lessons. I didn't like playing the piano. It wasn't really my jam. I was not a good piano student. I didn't practice. I wasn't, I don't think any of my piano teachers were particularly happy with me about that. But I did learn music theory, and I'm very grateful to have learned music theory. That has obviously come in handy in later years. I always wanted to be a bass player. That was my bass guitar. That was kind of always my dream. And I picked that up in my 30s. That was when I finally got to a point where I was like, okay, I think I'm ready to do this. In terms of singing, when we lived in Chicago, that brief stint we were in Chicago, I was in a professional children's chorus. It's called the
Mhm.
Evanston Children's Chorus. Evanston's a suburb of Chicago. I think they still exist. I don't know. I haven't looked them up in a while, but I was there for pretty much the whole time we were there. It was a professional chorus. There was a pretty hefty audition process to even get a place there. And so I was a member of that chorus. We performed all over, the Chicago area. Kind of the big culmination when I was there was we got to play at Chicago's Orchestra Hall, where the Chicago Symphony plays. We had a big performance there. So singing has always been a big part of my life. When I, came to California, became more of a theater person. My dream was I wanted to be on Broadway, so I did take singing lessons, kind of in support of, being trained vocally for theater. So I have quite a bit of vocal training under my belt, and that kind of, when I fell into playing music, and that, I've been a music appreciator my whole life, and I always wanted to be a bass player. And so kind of, through that musical journey up until then, it kind of set me up to a point where when I was in my 30s, I was living in a town in the Hudson Valley. It's Beacon, New York. It's a small city, but it's filled with a lot of artists and, musicians and writers and creatives. A lot of them are transplants from New York City who moved up there. Um, and I found a really wonderful, robust, welcoming music community there. And that was kind of when I thought, hey, if there's any good time to finally pursue my bass guitar dreams, this is it. And so I started playing bass guitar there. There's a music school there called Beacon Music Factory, run by a really good friend of mine. I took classes there for a long while. I actually worked there for a while. I was the business manager there. And so basically my entire music community kind of came from living in that town. Everybody that I collaborate with now, for my original music as well, is via a connection that I made through living in Beacon and in that kind of musician community. So that's the little journey. That's the trajectory of how I got here. And then, as somebody who is a writer and appreciator of words, songwriting is something that I always wanted to do. Some of my favorite songwriter, Bob Dylan, Bruce Springsteen, like their their songwriting it's songwriting, but it's poetry. It's literally, I mean, Bob Dylan won the Nobel Prize for literature. So I appreciate songwriters who can tell very, very good stories. And I think because I have this sort of creative writing background, when I approach songwriting, I look at it more as an avenue for storytelling, memoir through storytelling, or, memoir through songwriting, storytelling through songwriting. So that's my, I don't want to say that's my elevator pitch. That was much longer than an elevator pitch, but
But I mean, having artists like Bob Dylan, Bruce Springsteen as kind of an influence, especially as storytellers, and they're both quite
Mhm.
giant storytellers in their
Yeah.
and how they do it and what they, I think is especially from the East Coast side. Growing up, I think Bob Dylan spent quite a lot of time there, and then went to the West Coast. But
Mhm.
um, it sounds like even when you share the Beatles and U2, again, there's so much of major influences which can take you anywhere. From
Yeah.
that, it's kind of a
Yeah.
blueprint to kind of just go and kind of create your own.
Yeah.
Um,
Absolutely.
let's get started with your first track. Um,
Okay.
speaking of the Beatles,
Yeah.
this is 8 Days a Week.
Yes. So this song is, I put it at number one. I was, when I gave you my list, I was trying to do it chronologically as best as possible. Some of the stuff in the middle kind of got mishmashed because of, teenager, young adulthood. It all, kind of try to put it together. 8 Days a Week is probably, it's linked to probably my first real memory. I was maybe 3 years old. We were living in the Washington, D.C. area. We were living in Silver Spring, Maryland. It's a D.C. suburb. I was grocery shopping with my mom. I was 3. I was sitting in the shopping cart, and the grocery store that we would shop at used to play oldies over the PA, and they were playing 8 Days a Week one day, and I was 3, and I was like, hey, uh, why are they saying 8 days a week? I know there aren't 8 days in a week. There's only 7 days in a week. Mom, what is this? This song is wrong. What's going on? And my mother was a huge, huge Beatles fan. And she was like, oh, no, no, that's, that's the song. That's kind of what makes the song clever. It's just, and again, you explaining that to a 3-year-old is difficult, but she was like, no, that's part of what's interesting about the song. And that was sort of the beginning of a trajectory where, she being a big Beatles fan, she owned all of the Beatles records on, vinyl. And that was kind of the beginning of her sharing this very important part of her life with me, kind of giving me, from there on out, like playing the music, listening to the music with me, and, talking about the songs. And, with her in particular, she had a music education, but yeah, so I'm the child of immigrants. My parents are both from India. They came here in 1978. So my mother was trained vocally in the Indian classical tradition when she was young. Just coincidentally, not to get too name droppy here, but Ravi Shankar was a family friend. So one of his students was her teacher. So she had a musical background, but Indian classical music it's a very different mode of music than Western classical music. It's a different scale, it's different time signatures, it's just a different way of looking at music. So she was musical, but she didn't necessarily know Western music. But she, the Beatles were everywhere when she was growing
Yeah.
up, in the 60s and the 70s. And so with her, it was interesting to, when I think about it now, she wasn't really giving me a music education in terms of, here's how this song is constructed, and here's how why the harmonies are interesting, and here's why what they're doing sonically, and what Ringo's doing with the drums in this song. And as they evolved through, Revolver and Sergeant Pepper, it was not that kind of education. For her, it was about what the songs, how they made her feel emotionally, and what moved her about them. And that was sort of my first introduction to how how you can appreciate art, not just for, oh, that's a song and that's great because that's an interesting song and it's on the radio and cool. But how music, and then I think this is true for any art, visual art, dance, writing, filmmaking, theater, if it's if it moves you, then it's doing what it's supposed to do. So if you're, if you've created something and it's out there in the world and people are saying that they're moved by it, that means that you have succeeded. That's at least how I look at it. So that
Right.
was sort of the lens through which she took me through the Beatles. Was, what I took from it was not just their amazing songs, but just the idea of how to understand music and art, as something that can touch you emotionally, and appreciate art in that regard. So that's, 8 days a week was, again, it's tied to that very first sitting in the shopping cart saying, "Hey, wait a minute, there's no 8 days in a week.
Yeah.
What's going on?" um,
It's so
and
true.
yeah, and then just, and again, just the memories of her, and then just, for context, my mother passed away when I was 12. She had cancer. She was diagnosed with cancer when I was 4. She passed away when I was 12. She was a very, very tough lady. She beat it back several times. She was in remission, it would come back. She was in remission, it would come back. And so I lost her very, very young. And so there's also a part of me that, a lot of when I think about the Beatles, I think about her. They're very intrinsically linked in my mind. I can't really separate them. And this song in particular is one song just because of that it is my first, I think it is actually my first conscious memory.
Mm.
That song in particular is really just very meaningful to me. It's the kind of song where, I was telling somebody that if I'm driving somewhere and I'm on my way home and I've got the radio on or I've got Spotify on and it's on shuffle and I pull into the driveway and 8 days a week is on, I stop, I don't get out of the car, I sit and I listen to it all the way through before I turn the car off and go back in. It's just, I hear it and I have to listen to it all the way through.
Yeah.
So
Um, did your parents, were they born in India and then moved over, or were they
yes.
already?
Yes,
Okay.
yes. My mother was born in New Delhi and lived there pretty much until they came to the States. She was from a very prominent academic, and her father was a diplomat. She was born in 1950, so just after Indian independence, and her father worked for Nehru's first government. So they were kind of a very well-connected political family. Her brother was a history professor at St. Stephen's College, which is part of the Delhi University kind of umbrella. St. Stephen's College is kind of like the Harvard of India.
Hmm.
And in the 70s, it was kind of a hotbed of a lot of, student activism and, political thought, Marxism. A lot of political India was born in the 1970s and came out of that part of the country and that kind of population of people. So that's the environment in which she grew up. My dad was born in Calcutta, and then he eventually moved to New Delhi for graduate school. And he went to graduate school at St. Stephen's College, then started teaching there and became friends with my mom's brother, the history professor. And then they became best friends, and he met my mother through him, and the rest is history there. And then they got married in 1977, I think, and then in 1978 they decided to come to the US for further study. My mother was an attorney. She wanted to get her LLM. My dad had gotten his master's by that point. He wanted to get a PhD
Yeah.
he was in English literature. So they ended up in the Washington D.C. area, and that's how I came to be.
So music for them, I mean, was it accepted for them to be into like Western music,
I mean,
Beatles
absolutely.
and all that?
Yeah, yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely. I mean, that it was, if we're talking about especially the Beatles. I mean, they were everywhere. And then of course, the
Global.
Beatles, yeah, and the Beatles famously came to India for a while. Um, you know,
Change their life, maybe.
yes, maybe, yeah, exactly. Depending on who you ask and what mood they're in, they'll tell you. So yeah, no, absolutely. That was, yeah, just a global phenomenon. My dad studied Western violin when he was in high school. He was a part of his high school orchestra. He was first chair violin in his high school orchestra. He likes to remind everybody of that now, even 60 years later. Um, and so, that's another thing too. And when I was kind of forced into these piano lessons against my will, my dad was not necessarily like, "Oh, it has to be piano," but he said, I just think music theory is a good thing to learn. I gained a lot by learning music theory. And he said, "I just think that every child should know it. It's good for cognition. It's just good for That's kind of he was looking at it from kind of pedagogical point of view. So yeah, no, it was absolutely, I mean, again, the Beatles, wherever you went. My dad is also a big folkie. He loved Bob Dylan, Peter, Paul and Mary,
Hmm.
Everly Brothers, stuff like that. He kind of, after learning violin when he was in college, he picked up guitar, not, not in a, he's playing epic guitar solos or anything like that, but he picked up acoustic guitar as a stringed instrument. He kind of was able to map his violin knowledge against that, and he was able to play along to his favorite Bob Dylan songs, and kind of, so that's another thing too. I give my mother a lot of credit for getting me to the point where I was interested in music, but I don't want to discount my dad's influence, because there was always an acoustic guitar at home, and he was always there kind of strumming along and singing Bob Dylan songs, and giving me that side of the music world as well, for the just not the Beatles, not just the Beatles centric stuff, but here's how you play music, here's how you perform music. Even if it's just for yourself, just for your own enjoyment.
It sounds incredible to have grown up with both your parents having a musical kind of in encouraging and supporting you to want to be
Yeah.
at least to embrace music. And I think it's interesting your dad's perspective of like the structure of music, taking
Mhm.
that perspective on. It actually does kind of put more of a discipline as a person as well.
Yes. Yeah, I mean, that's funny you use that word discipline. I remember because we used to, the fact that I did not practice, because I did not really want to be in, I just didn't want to play piano. I was like, come on, put me in bass lessons, guys, come on. And that was just, for whatever reason, not something that they, it just wasn't within their frame of reference. My mom wanted me to grow up and end up at Carnegie Hall playing the Moonlight Sonata or something. And I was like, that's not what I want. I want to play rock and roll. Um,
CBGB's playing
Yeah,
bass.
exactly, exactly. But the word discipline, is funny that you use that word, because I resisted practicing, and that was maybe my form of passive resistance. I was like, I don't want to be in these piano lessons, so maybe if I don't practice and I'm terrible enough, the teachers will just ditch me. Lost cause. But I remember my father was just kind of like, and again, this is hard to tell somebody I took piano lessons from the ages of 6 through 12, telling an 8-year-old, just practice for an hour a day. It's good discipline. Um, I wanted to play outside,
Yeah.
I wasn't really interested, but he thought of it as discipline, and not necessarily only discipline, like you don't get joy out of playing music, but he did look at it as, like you're, it's not just that you're taking lessons, you're studying. This is a way of studying, and this is a way of training your brain to think in a certain way. And I think he was a professor for many, many years. So I think he's got kind of, and he still now, he's retired now. And then also he had a very dramatic career pivot right around when I was born, because my mother was an attorney. She was the breadwinner of the family. He was a college professor, and then she got pregnant, and it wasn't a surprise. They wanted to have kids. But all of a sudden he was like, "Oh, she's going to be on maternity leave, and professors don't make a whole lot of money." And he was also at a point where he'd gotten his PhD, and he realized that he really liked the teaching part of being a professor and being in academia, but then there's also the political part of being a professor, and
Mm.
conferences and publishing and all that stuff. And he was like, well, no, I just like being in a classroom talking with students and talking about books with students, and I don't really want to play the game. And also, professors don't make any money, and babies are expensive. And so he pivoted. He went to business school, and then he spent his entire career after that working in corporate finance, in banking. He worked for Bank of America. He spent the last 16 years of his career working for Wells Fargo. So he had a very strange career pivot. But there is a part of him he's always kind of got his professor hat on.
Mhm.
So again, so even, by the time I was old enough that he was well into his, corporate finance career, but he still was looking at, he kind of, everything that he did, he would kind of look at it through that sort of educator lens.
Yeah.
So again, he was like, this is about education. This isn't necessarily about, for him, he was like, I don't care if you go to Carnegie Hall or not. I just think this is valuable for you to learn. And then, of course, my mom would jump in and be like, well, I think she could make it to Carnegie Hall. And I was like, really? I'm very bad. I'm a very, very bad pianist. I don't think that's going to happen.
Well, you could have put a business plan to your father and said, look, a Steinway piano is this expensive. And if you want to give me a bass and a amp and maybe some pedals and picks, it's going to
Much
cost this.
cheaper.
Yeah.
Much cheaper. Yeah, no, we
Economically, it's
we had an upright Steinway piano in the house, and they bought it for my piano lessons. And I look back on it now, and I was like, oh, how much did that cost? Like, that's a shame. I barely even touched it. So yeah, no, that's that's funny that you put it that way. I could have it's funny. I my day job is I'm an accountant. So I could have now I could probably sit down and do the cost benefit analysis and present it to him, 30 years too late, but still.
We get to track number 2.
Mhm.
This is U2, Walk On.
Yes. Okay, so this is where, and again, like I said, I was trying to do it chronologically, but everything's probably going to be a bit of a mishmash. So, when I was in high school, that is when All That You Can Leave Behind, the album that Walk On is from, was out. It was everywhere. I went
Is
to a
that with
very
Beautiful Day?
beautiful day. Yes, exactly.
Yeah. Okay. What?
And so that album was, I went to a very, very small high school in San Francisco. When I was there, there were 250 students total in the school. I think there was only 66 or 67 kids in my graduating class. Um, Hippie high school. The school is a block away from Haight-Ashbury. It was founded in the 60s. It had kind of an untraditional, grading methodology, and, just very, kind of a very, very arts focused school. I don't know if it's the same way now. It's been 20 plus years and things have evolved, but that's the way it was back then. And that was an album, I think, just because Beautiful Day was everywhere. It was so ubiquitous. It was all over the radio. That was an album that, as I recall, it felt like the whole school, all of my classmates loved that album. It was just a kind of almost a universal touchstone. And so that album in its entirety just carries emotional weight for me, because it reminds me of that time in my life, being in high school, my friends there, where the school was, what I was up to, what I was doing. That was when I was in my theater kid mode. And then Walk On in particular, as a single, it came out right around when 9/11 happened.
Yeah.
And so that song, I guess the message of that song, it's very, kind of, empowering. And, when things are going wrong, keep going forward, it'll be okay. That's kind of the message of the song. Obviously, they didn't write it knowing that 9/11 was going to happen. It just happened. I was looking this up recently. I think it came out as a single, like alarmingly close to when
2000 it came out.
yeah. So it was one of those songs that, again, it got a lot of radio play in the aftermath of 9/11. And so again, I was a junior in high school when 9/11 happened. And, again, it's kind of one of those things where the album itself reminds me of high school. That obviously is a very, formative milestone for, for those who were, alive and cognizant of the world at that time. And so that song, in particular, it just carries a lot of meaning. And then even going forward in my life, when, when things get rough or whatever, that is a song that I will turn to, just kind of as an emotional bolster. I really like U2 as a band as well. Some people find that to be a polarizing opinion. I think they're very, very great musicians, all four of them individually. And then as a band, I think everybody got mad at them when they kind of put that one album of theirs on everyone's iPhone without their consent. I feel like that's when everyone got mad at them, which is funny because
I think there's worse things to be mad about than that.
I know. I don't know why everyone got so mad at them. I was like, you don't want it, just delete it. It's not that big of a deal. In the meantime, I got a free U2 album. I was like, this is great. I don't have to pay for it. and then, I think a lot of people, I've seen U2 live a lot, and and my partner Tim, he's also a U2 fan, but seeing U2 live, you'll get a political speech from Bono, and and sometimes it will be a very long political speech, and some people are just like, oh, I just want to hear the song, stop, and Tim is a
Yeah.
little bit like that. He's like, oh, Bono, shut up, I just want to hear the songs. Bono's heart is in the right place. His politics are good. I don't have a problem with if he wants to give a little speech, just let him. And again, so Walk On is again one of those songs where it carries so much meaning because of when it was released, because of what was going on in the world. It was when it was released, and also just because I was at this very, formative age, throughout all of that. And again, it is a song that I turn to, again, now when if I feel like I want, things are rough, or I feel like I want, I just need a little bit of an emotional bolster. That's a song that can kind of put me in a, in a better frame of mind, or at least a more kind of, hopeful frame of mind.
This album in particular, I remember it in 2000, when the album came out, and besides Beautiful Day, I think Stuck in the Moment is one of my favorite songs off of it.
Oh, I love that song too. I've actually covered that song. A friend of mine, my friend James, who's another one of my creative partners, we did a cover of it during the pandemic, during lockdown. We kind of were a COVID pod, him and his girlfriend and me and Tim. And he and I, just to kind of, we were both out of work, lockdown, we lost our jobs. And just to sort of kind of keep ourselves sane, we were like, let's do something. So we kind of
Yeah.
embarked on this project where we were just like, what are some of my favorite songs? Let's cover them. And Stuck in a Moment was one of the ones we did. I think Stuck in a Moment is a beautiful song too. It's fantastic. I agree with you there.
Now, I would say the last track on your album, This Place,
Mhm.
and this is a compliment, so don't. It
I think
has
I
the
think I know where you're
beginning
going.
intro guitar. I'm like, I think Edge was playing on this track for them.
I
It's got a very inspired by U2 sound, I thought,
uh,
and it was a good way, in a good way, absolutely
yeah,
good way. I was like,
I'm
this
so
sounds really, really good, and I love that kind of when I heard the intro and that.
I'm so glad that you said that. I'm so glad that you said it's in a good way, and I will be very honest with you, we did that intentionally.
Okay.
That was when we were writing the album. I was speaking with Luke, my creative partner, and we knew what the song was going to be about. And we were talking about, we wanted the album to kind of go out with a bang. And I said, he's like, what is the vibe you're going for? And I was like, I'm thinking arena rock. I want this to be the kind of song where like you could be at Madison Square Garden or Meadowlands or whatever, and everyone's up there dancing and singing along. And then I was like, Luke, I love you too. And he wasn't necessary. He didn't dislike U2, he just wasn't as familiar with their discography as I was. And so I basically flung a bunch of U2. I said, listen to All That You Can Leave Behind, Joshua Tree, Achtung Baby, Boy, War, listen to all of it. And then I want to say I almost basically told him, write a U2 song without writing a
Yeah.
U2 song. And it came out really well, to the point where like I love that you said that when you heard the introduction, you kind of felt the U2 vibe right away. When Luke sent me the instrumental demo, we didn't have full lyrics for it yet. We just, he came up with the demo, and I was listening to it at home, and Tim walked by and he was like, what U2 song? He's like, what album is this off of? I can't place it. What is this? And I was like, oh, success. We did it. We did it right.
Yeah.
We've achieved our goal. And I was like, yeah, it's not a U2 song. This is a Reeya Banerjee song. And he was like, okay, all right, that's cool. So thank you for saying that. That means it's doing what I intended it to do. That was my goal, was to do my own version of a U2 song.
Where does the title of your song come from? Upstate Rust. I mean, it's
Upstate
a great
Russ.
title.
Yeah. So the song is specifically, it's the last song on the album, and it's about our decision after the pandemic. We'd lived in the Hudson Valley for 20 years, and then neither of us could find work after the pandemic. We'd both been working in Manhattan prior to lockdown. We'd both been working in the hospitality industry, and just there weren't very many jobs. A lot of businesses closed down during the pandemic, never reopened, and so it became just kind of an unfortunate reality. We realized that if we wanted to find work, we were going to have to look outside of New York City, outside of the Hudson Valley. And it kind of became a question of whichever one of us found a job first, then we would go, and the other person would. So he found a job first up in the Capital District near Albany. So it's further upstate. Um,
Wow.
and it was, it was 2.5 hours upstate from where we were, which is not necessarily a long way away, but we weren't in Albany proper. We were kind of in this very small town called Cambridge, which is almost closer to the Vermont border. It's closer to southern Vermont than it is to
Hmm.
anything in New York. It's 30 minutes from Bennington, Vermont, and
Oh
45
yeah.
minutes from Saratoga Springs. So very bucolic, quiet town. As somebody who grew up in San Francisco, worked in Manhattan, lived in the Hudson Valley, but in this kind of bustling artist city, it was a huge contrast to move up there. It was I'll be honest, I did not really like living up there. It was very pretty. I'll give you that. But so the song is about our decision to we had to make a very difficult decision to leave home in order to, have, to survive, financially and otherwise. And so the lyrics of that song are kind of about, like we're making a choice. We're leaving this place. We're doing it together. This is kind of a very, like a very adult moment, where we're making a choice
Hmm.
to do, but we're doing it together. We're in this together. The title itself, obviously we're moving upstate. The title itself came from um, a former work colleague of mine many years prior. I had just joined the company that I was working for, and I was chatting with him, and he could tell I don't really have this accent anymore, but back then I had a much stronger kind of Hudson Valley, New York accent. And so he could tell by the way I spoke and kind of the patterns of how I would speak and stuff like that. He was like, we were in Manhattan. He was like, "You're not from the city, are you?" And I was like, "Oh, no, no, no. I'm from the Hudson Valley. I live about an hour north." And he said he'd grown up in Ithaca, which is very, very, very far upstate. But he said, I feel very comfortable around you because you're a New Yorker, but you're not like a city New Yorker. I can kind of feel that, you're a little bit more. He's like, you're a little bit more down to
There's
earth. You're a little bit
softness
more
instead of that
exactly.
hard New
It's
York
a
kind of.
little more down to earth, a little more earthy, a little less, a fast talker. And, he's like, I could kind of tell and I feel comfortable around you. And the way he ultimately put it was, he said, "You've got this upstate rust about you." And I was like, oh, what a poetic way to put it. We're
Okay.
talking about something that somebody said to me 10 years ago. 2015 is when I met this guy. His name is AC Karcham. I will never forget. Because that term upstate rust just stuck in my head for years and years and years. And like, I would for a while, very silly. Not that anybody looks at this, but like on Facebook, you can put a little like log line of who you are, and I would write upstate rust, or I've got that upstate rust about me. So that's just a phrase that stuck in my head for a long, long time. And then it came time to write this record, and I was like, I think that's a song title.
Yeah.
You know, I think that that's what it was destined for. So AC handed me a gift 10 years ago by accident, by just that one very surprisingly poetic phrase that you would not expect to hear in a stuffy corporate Manhattan environment. But there you go.
We come to track three.
Mhm.
Now this is the song is called Mitwa.
Yes, yes, you've got that right. Yes. So this is a song from it's a Bollywood movie. Child of Indian immigrants. I grew up watching a lot of Bollywood movies for a long time. The generation of Indian American that I am, the only Indian person on TV for a long time was Apu on The Simpsons, who is a cartoon.
Hmm.
This is before we had, Mindy Kaling, Hassan Minaj, Aziz Ansari, all of these, Kumail Nanjiani, these, South Asian American actors who are now kind of more, visible in the
Yeah.
media that back then it was just it was Apu or nothing. And so watching Bollywood movies for me as a child was kind of a way to look at media and see people who looked like me. And that was very comforting because that just wasn't my experience, especially as somebody who was interested in the performing arts. I was often the only person of color in a room when we were doing a play, or, the only person of color, even at my high school. It was a majority white high school. And so there was something, just to have these movies there. Was very just it was comforting in that regard. The movie that song is from, it's called Kabhi Alvida na Kehna, which means never say goodbye. That movie was filmed in 2006. I was in college. Um, they were filming in New York. I happened to stumble across them filming because I was going to the Indian consulate because I needed to get a visa. We were going to go to India to visit my grandmother, and I have a U.S. passport, so I need to get a visa to enter the country. And they were filming outside of the consulate, and my favorite actor, Shah Rukh Khan, all of a sudden rounds the corner. They've got the whole thing cordoned off because it's a film set. Not unusual in New York. It's usually Law and Order. They've got a corner cordoned off because they're filming a scene from Law and Order. So I was kind of curious. I was staying out of the way. And then around the corner comes Shah Rukh Khan, who's like my favorite Bollywood actor of all time. And my head exploded. I was like, what is going on here? And then I was kind of, there's a throng of people who are all kind of gawking along. And I was like, what is this? And they said, this is a new Shah Rukh Khan film. They're filming it here in New York. And they're always, like they're looking for extras. So I found the local casting company that was looking for extras, and I submitted, this is my name, this is where I live, here's what I look like, and I ended up being an extra in 2 scenes that they were filming for several months in New York. So I'm an extra in 2 scenes in that movie. I know exactly which scenes they are. I can point them out. And then that movie also, eventually that was my senior year of college, and I studied, like I mentioned before, I studied film in college, film theory. And I was writing my senior film thesis was about Bollywood films. It was specifically about the use of foreign locations in Bollywood movies in the last 10, 15, well, no, more longer now. It's been many, many years, the last 30, 40 years. A lot of Bollywood movies are now not set in India. They're set kind of in the diaspora. So there's movies that are set in London, in Australia, in a lot in the United States, in New York. And I was kind of looking at how when you take a Bollywood plot and you set it outside of India, it allows you to tell stories differently because you're not kind of locked into a very traditional Hindu fundamentalist paradigm. You pull the Indian characters out, and you put them in a Western environment, you can tell different stories. And that makes these movies I'm getting very, very deep into my whatever. It makes the stories more interesting to the diaspora. And so these movies get huge box office returns in areas of the world where there are large Indian populations, but because the plot lines are a little out there, they might be a little bit about subjects that are still considered taboo in conservative India. Like the movie I'm talking about is about extramarital, like two couples, and there's an extramarital affair to the husband and wife. They fall in love with each other, and there's huge fallout, obviously. And so it caused a bit of a scandal in India, but it got huge box office numbers outside of India. And so I was kind of intrigued by that. And I started looking at other movies that were filmed for. So, and there's a lot of stuff about, the way gender is. Anyway, long story short, that movie means a lot to me because I was an extra in it, because it ended up being kind of a hinge for this academic work I was doing to close out my college career. And then the song in particular it's a beautiful song, and the way it is filmed in the movie, again, it's my favorite actor, Shah Rukh Khan. And he, it's scenes of him in New York with the woman, the married woman he fell in love with. And they're just kind of exploring the city, and it's about, kind of, it's a song about longing. It's a song about, wanting, feeling a very deep connection with somebody, and, just sort of the overwhelmingness and the overwhelm and the confusion, but also just like the certainty that maybe, the conceit is these two married couples are very unhappy. So there's, that there's an avenue for. So again, it's a song about that sort of the overwhelm of finding a connection, and finding a connection kind of even late in life, in not super late in life, but in your 40s, and kind of finding who your person is. And then but you're stuck in these situations, and you're going to hurt people if you want to pursue that, and how do you do that? But it's really just about the kind of overwhelming emotions of that kind of connection, that kind of love. And there's this beautiful shot of Shah Rukh Khan, shot from below, and you can see him, skyscrapers behind him, and the camera is kind of rotating around him as he's singing. And that's just, it's one of those shots that's just so beautiful. And the song is also very beautiful. And so that's, again, it's one of those, it's that song is beautiful, the scene is beautiful, and then again it connects to I was an extra in the film. I
That's
wrote
so
about
good.
it in my senior thesis. I was the first student in my college's film department to write about non-Western cinema. So it's just, there's many tracks upon which that song is meaningful to me. So
I think the first time I got introduced more or less to a Bollywood film was probably in the 90s when I was living in the UK and
Mhm.
moved there from the States. And I remember seeing one, and I think it was roughly based around Kramer versus Kramer, if you remember that movie with Dustin Hoffman.
Oh, yeah,
And it was
yeah, yeah,
some
yeah.
Bollywood, and it was, and I was like, but, and I was kind of watching, and I was like, but this storyline's Kramer versus Kramer. And then they were like, yeah, and they, I guess, quite maybe a lot they did this, that some of the Bollywood films would be based off of Hollywood films that were kind of, and then take it and make a version of it, which is quite sometimes more comical or sometimes more just, but it was really interesting when I saw that.
Yeah, so the movie I'm talking about now, actually the filmmaker has said that he was inspired by the movie Closer, the Mike Nichols film about the Natalie Portman, Jude Law,
Oh
Clive
yeah,
Owen,
yeah, yeah, yeah,
Roberts.
exactly.
But that is a rough movie. I mean, it's obviously about extramural, but that is a rough, ugly movie.
Yeah,
The Bollywood version of it is a little less brutal, a little
yeah.
less, it's not as ugly. It's a little bit more, I don't want to say a friendly take on extramarital affairs. That sounds like a weird thing to say, but it's not, it's not rough. It doesn't have the rough language. It doesn't have this sort of really toxic behavior that you see in the Mike Nichols film. But the basic premise is two unhappy couples, and what
Yeah.
happens when, when there's a rupture, and two people connect in a way that is, you know.
And this is a fact of life. I mean, this happens
Mhm.
everywhere in
Oh
the
yeah.
world. So it's
Yeah.
not just, I think some cultures in some countries it's a little bit taboo to talk about this, but it's happening and it
Absolutely.
does happen. So
Yep.
um,
Exactly.
do you think that one, I think, huge film that brought more Indian culture to Western world in particular
Mhm.
was Slumdog Millionaire?
Yes. Yeah, yeah. Uh I have some mixed feelings about that movie. On the whole, I love it. It's just a fun movie I love Danny Boyle. I think Danny
Hmm.
Boyle is a great filmmaker. And so it's a very fun watch. It's uplifting. You're rooting for oh God, I wish I could remember the character name, but Dev Patel's character. You want him to succeed, you want him to get the girl, you want him to win the $1 million on Who Wants to Be a Millionaire. There's a little bit of poverty porn, as the way I would put it, just
Yeah,
kind of delving into that, and that's often a stereotype you'll see in um, non-Bollywood movies and in movies about India that are made by, other, either, white filmmakers or, Indian filmmakers who are outside of that. And that's something that, obviously poverty is a very real, and a very real and a big problem in India, which is not to say that it's not a problem elsewhere, but it is certainly a big problem in India. But when almost every depiction of India in Western cinema is kind of
hmm,
hinging on stories of, oh, here's the kid who broke out of poverty. It kind of gives a very skewed perspective of the country
yeah,
um,
yeah,
to Western audiences, and so that's something and that's not isolated to Slumdog Millionaire, and I certainly don't hold that against Danny Boyle, because that story doesn't work if that's not a kid who's breaking out of
yeah.
poverty. I mean, it's not, but that is something that, just kind of big picture wise, I'm kind of like, oh, it's another India is full of poor people movie. And that kind of makes me feel a little bit sad that that's what's out there. But as a story, it's a fantastic story, and it's got great music, really, really amazing music.
Mhm.
So,
But I think Danny Boyle tends to. I mean, if you look at Train Spotting, that was one of
mhm,
the first things I've seen by him, and I remember, and it was just the rawness there, in
yeah.
the kind of reflection of people in Scotland, in the area. And I've read the book as well about Irvin Welsh.
Oh, okay. I haven't read the book. Yeah. Mhm.
So kind of the way he painted it was brought that really rough end of Scottish
Yeah.
life in the time, and like, so I'm not trying to justify or defend him in
No, no,
terms
no, no.
of
I know what you
India,
mean.
but he tends
He
to be that sort of, that's his kind of lens that he
I
kind of
I no,
goes
I
with.
totally agree, I totally agree. Yeah, and again, like, I wouldn't say I'm not saying that I condemn Slumdog Millionaire. I totally agree with you that 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 type of story is something that obviously is compelling to Danny Boyle. Even if you look at 28 Days Later, which is, like
Mhm.
a post-apocalyptic film, it's not necessarily about, the kind of, rough environment of, people dealing with addiction or, poverty in India, but it's this very, very dark, desperate,
Yeah.
zombies post-apocalyptic film. So I think that is, I agree with you. That's definitely a mode in which he enjoys storytelling. This sort of, people kind of living in bleakness and how they survive. So yeah, absolutely. I agree with you on that. Um, and yeah, I do love him as a filmmaker. I think Trainspotting is an amazing movie. So
We come to track 4.
mhm.
This is now I'm picking it from where we was missing. So this is Green
Oh
Day.
yeah, I forgot my track 4.
Boulevard of Broken Dreams.
Yes. Okay. So it's Green Day. This was, I think it came out right when I started college. This is a song that Green Day as a band is a song that when you listen to my original music, they are a touchstone for the music the music that I write for myself. A lot of my music, or not a lot of, most of my music is inspired by what was on the radio, top 40 radio when I was in elementary and middle school and to a certain extent high school. Luke, my creative partner, he's almost exactly my age. He's a week younger than me. So
Mhm.
we have these same touchstones of, this post grunge, pop rock kind of vibe. So Green Day falls in that category, Red Hot Chili Peppers, Matchbox 20, Third Eye Blind, and then even, you go to people like Alanis Morissette, stuff like that. Those are sort of the threads that kind of make up the music that I make. So this Green Day song in particular resonates with me. Just because of where I was my first year of college. It was, I'd moved from California to New York. College is overwhelming no matter where you are. I don't know anybody who doesn't find the first year of college to be overwhelming in one way or another.
Mhm.
I struggled a lot in my first year of college. I have there's kind of a long tail of um, uh, mental health issues in my family. Bipolar depression runs on both sides of my family. And I had in high school kind of shown some symptoms that might have pointed to that, but not enough that, at that point it was just my dad and me. He was a single dad. He was doing his best. He didn't necessarily put two and two together. When you get to college, it is very common at that age for, if mental illness is something that is, that's in your brain chemistry, often that is when the real heavy symptoms start to show.
Mhm.
So I was very, very depressed my first semester of college. I wasn't studying. I was skipping class. I was partying a lot. I was sleeping a lot. I just didn't, I was not, I, the way I would put it now at age 40 is I was not okay.
Right.
Um, so, and that was a song that's literally, I mean, the lyric Boulevard of Broken Dreams. It's just a song about, you're walking and it's bleak and everything that you want and hope for in your life is just not going well, and my shadow is the only thing that's following me. The just it's so bleak, and it was one of those things where I would listen to it. I walk around campus and I had my headphones on and I just listen to it. And I'm just kind of like, oh, I'm going to wallow in the misery in this song. But it's a really great song. When 20 years later, I listen to it, it's a really, really, really great song. The way it's constructed, the way it's written, just the guitar part that kind of, I just, in my head, when the song starts, it's got that kind of like echoing shimmery guitar thing, that pulsing guitar thing that starts the song. It's just very cool. It kind of sets the tone for the song. And I think Billy Joe Armstrong obviously is a fantastic vocalist. And then in particular, the ending of the song, the outro, has this very long kind of repeating, looping lead guitar line that goes on and on and on, and it kind of packs
Yeah.
on more and more. And it's kind of like, in my head, it's kind of like whiplash. It's like it's just more and more and more. It's just very, very brutal. So that's a song that's very it's got a very visceral, and when I think about that song and how it connects to how I was feeling when I first came across it and when I was first listening to it a lot, it's very visceral. It's almost very literal. I felt like my life was broken, and here's a song about broken dreams. And then with the hindsight, almost 20 years later, I'm in a I'm in a much better place. And so I don't necessarily listen to that song and say, "Oh, I identify with this now." Now I can step back and say, this is actually a very, very well constructed song, just musically. When I look at it as a musician, there's a lot of really interesting stuff going on compositionally that I like. And then also lyrically, I think it's a very well written song. So again, two tracks of appreciation, the kind of the visceral memory of it, and then the sort of musician me many years later, appreciating the way that song is crafted.
Yeah, I've listened to it quite a few times and have this album by Green Day.
Mhm.
I got kind of an appreciation for them later on because of their interest or their inspiration from punk. So
Mhm.
although I never really listened to them when they were on the radio, I actually did appreciate how they were inspired by a lot of punk music from
Very
the
much
early
so.
'80s.
Yeah.
And I don't know their age compared to mine, but I think we probably have quite similar tastes in
Mhm.
music or some of their influences that they have. So that kind of gave me a bigger appreciation. And then listening to their songs, like you said, taking it for more as listening, not connection. I think I
Mhm.
did learn to appreciate, and I could understand the songwriting craft that they did, and
Yeah.
like, and especially lyric wise.
Mhm.
I think this album in particular, I think this song off of was, I think, the
It's
first kind of,
American Idiot. Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah. And that's a brilliant album all the
yeah.
way through. It's a really, really good album. Um,
Um, what types of different genres of music are you influenced by?
so yeah, I'm all over the place. Like I just told you, my original music kind of comes from that sort of what was on I'm just a little bit too young to have been in the grunge era proper.
Yeah.
Uh just a hair too little. I know Nirvana. I love Nirvana. I was just a little too young to be listening to the radio when they were everywhere. And by the time I was aware of Nirvana, Kurt Cobain had already passed on. But Foo Fighters, that's kind of that's one of my entry points. You know, so again, things that were on top 40 radio when I was growing up absolutely influences the music that I create. And then, in terms of just general touchstones, we talked about the Beatles and my mother. That was, sort of my inroad into, appreciating music for, how it moves people. We've talked about my feelings about U2, Bruce Springsteen, Bob Dylan for storytelling reasons. Anything in the classic rock zone, the Stones, the Who, Led Zeppelin, that's all from, the years I spent doing, playing, covers, in that sort of bar band environment, where, you learn a bunch of, quote unquote standards. You go up and you know how to play the Stones songs that everybody wants to hear when they're hanging out at the pub and they want to hear something familiar, and the Who and Zeppelin and stuff like that. So that's also very much a part of my musical DNA. And actually, in between the two albums that I have written, I released two singles with my friend James. And those songs kind of are a little bit of a bridge between the two albums, and they're also a little bit of a bridge. There's a little bit more of that classic rock feel in those two singles. One is called Mechanic of the Hudson, and it's got a very kind of Pink Floyd-ish vibe. Um,
Mm-hmm.
and then we have, sections that sound a little bit more like what you hear on my records, but it's got kind of a more of a heavy, dark Pink Floyd, Dark Side of the Moon era Pink Floyd vibe. And then Shadows is the other single that I released in between the two. That's another very U2 flavored, maybe not as blatant as Upstate Rust, but there's definitely a little bit of that in there. One of the, now that my, this place, the record I just did is out in the world and kind of, doing its own thing and finding its people. I'm trying to think about what the next project is, and of course, I'm always going to be working with, Luke and I are a good partnership for, these LPs that I do. But James, he's my best friend in the whole world. We wrote those two singles together, and we've been talking about maybe we want to do an EP of a few songs, and maybe specifically we want to do an EP that kind of draws a little bit more, um, a little bit more aggressive is the wrong word, but a little bit more recognizably from that sort of classic rock
Mm-hmm.
tradition. That's, he and I met, in that world playing those songs. And so, we've been listening to a lot of Creedence Clearwater Revival and, the Stones during, like the Some Girls and Tattoo You era and stuff like that, that kind of very swampy, roots rock,
Mm-hmm.
southern sort of, not southern rock, but that kind of roots swampy sort of stuff. So we're playing around with some ideas. So yeah, that's it sounds like it, I say all of that and it sounds like I'm all over the place. I mean, one way to say it too is that I like all music. There's very few there's very few genres of music or very few musicians that I'm just kind of like, no, I refuse. I'm very, if we're talking about people who are good storytellers and good poets, I think Eminem is absolutely brilliant. And I will listen to almost anything that he releases because I just think that he is just an incredible poet. Just
Mm-hmm.
his sense of wordplay and his sense of storytelling and his, kind of not just storytelling in terms of, you look at something like Stan, which obviously is a very famous, that's a story in and of itself. But even his more autobiographical material is just very, very well done and evocative. And he's somebody who, I wouldn't necessarily say I'm inspired directly by Eminem, but I think the way he uses language and the way he tells stories is something that I think about when I try to tell my own stories as well. Again, just because so much of his material is so deeply personal,
Yeah.
and deeply personal about, just not just the fame monster. He's written a lot about that, but just demons and his childhood and his kind of his struggles to overcome addiction and be a good father to his children. And it's just very, very personal. And that's something, a lot of my not a lot most of my music is also similarly very, very personal. It's very very, very, again, songwriting is memoir. And so I think that that's something that different genre, different mode of storytelling, but it's the same impulse.
Yeah. Now we take a little turn. This is Take That
Yeah.
with Shine.
Yeah. So this is a song that
This is from 2006. So this is kind of later Take That, not from the
later ta
90s Take That.
yeah, yeah, yeah. And and I'm not that familiar with Take That's overall discography. I know that they're kind of in that Britpop, the band like Blur and everything that kind of came out when Oasis was doing their thing.
Mm-hmm.
Um, And so when I first came across this song, I was like, oh, this sounds like it could be a Beatles song. And then I saw what it was, Take That. I was like, of course, because that's all of those bands are kind of borrowing from that legacy. This song just sort of, it came to my forefront. I had a roommate for many, many years after college. We lived together, and he really liked this song, and he would play it a lot. And it's just, again, this is one of those, it's almost, it's just, this is like maybe a very simple explanation for why I like this song. And it's just like, it's very cheerful, and it's very cheerful is not the right word maybe, but it's the story of the song is somebody's telling their friend, hey, keep your head up, you're great, you're being very hard on yourself, but you don't need to be. I think you're a great person, and you're destined for great things. So it's a little bit similar to Walk On in terms of like a song that I grab onto when I'm feeling a little bit down, but it's a
Mm-hmm.
different type of emotion. Walk On is very big and very heavy and very, like if I'm having like extreme existential dread, or there's been a terrorist attack or something, that's where Walk On and and Bono kind of live sonically. This is a little bit more about, I am very hard on myself. I am a perfectionist. I've had mental health issues. I have, gone through, ups and downs there. I've, had career setbacks, day job career setbacks in my life because of that. Um, there are times when I kind of, you try not to, it's not helpful. People tell you not to do it, but sometimes you can't help it. You look on Facebook and you see people that you went to school with, and they're, off. Again, this is how I was feeling in that immediate kind of post college time period when this song was kind of brought to me by my roommate. Just feeling like you're being left behind. People are growing up and getting cool jobs and getting promotions and getting married and having kids, and I'm just kind of like, oh, I'm still working through a lot of junk in my life that's, that I can't move on and do those other things without getting through it. And so this song is just something that, it's just friendly. It feels like a friend who's coming and telling you, hey, you're going to be okay. I know you,
Yeah.
and you're going to be okay. And so I feel like that's, again, it was important to me back then because I was, kind of trying to muddle through a very rough period of my life. And now it's just kind of, again, a little bit of a reminder. I mean, now, especially, being an independent musician is difficult. Being an unlabeled musician is difficult. I spent a whole year promoting this album. I was doing it almost single-handedly. I had a publicist who was helping me with, I released 4 singles before the album came out. She was helping me get some, attention from, press outlets and, tastemaker, indie music blogs and stuff like that. But the rest of it, a lot of promoting an album, if you don't have a label, you're on social media constantly posting things, trying to get people to engage with you. Everyone, we live in a society where everyone has a 3-second attention span, and you're trying to get into everyone's doom scrolling, and you're trying to
Yeah.
get them to stop this. You want to put something out there that'll get them to stop and listen. And that's hard. That's very hard to do. And it's been exhausting. It's a very, from March through August, pretty much August 22nd, the album came out. I was on social media daily putting out something. I was, as the singles were coming out, heavily promoting the singles. We were making music videos. We were, I've been doing other podcasts and stuff like that. And just always, it's very gross to say this, but it's all about content, and so turning yourself into content it just sounds gross, but it's unfortunately
You have to be the whole machine yourself.
exactly, exactly, and it's exhausting. And so it's now sometimes I listen to this song and I'm just kind of like, it's just like, okay, you survive, you got the album out there, take a breath, you're fine, you're doing fine, you'll figure out your next steps after that. So it's when I was picking my 10 songs, I was listening to that song because I was just, it was a day when I was just kind of feeling the grind. The album is out. We're trying to get more shows. We're trying to get more, we did an album release show. We've got another show date coming up in December. I was trying to see if we could somehow squeeze another show in before the end of the year, but it's tricky with the holidays here in the US. We've got Thanksgiving and Christmas coming up. It just might not be possible. And again, I'm kind of, I'm still unproven. I'm an independent artist. I don't, I, and I've been away from New York City for a while. We moved upstate. We had the 1 year we moved down to Chattanooga. We came back. So I'm kind of re-entering the music scene in New York. I've been gone. And so you go to a venue and you say, "Hey, I'd like to do a show. Here's what I can show you. This is my new album. This is how it's being received." The music video for Upstate Rust is on YouTube. It's gotten over 1 million views right now. I don't know how. I'll take it. I'm happy to have that number.
For
But
sure.
but still, they're going to ask, the first question they ask you is, "What's your draw? How many tickets do you think you can sell?" And I'm like, me personally, I don't know, but I've got a band. I've got a backing band, and they're all people who I've known for years, and
So
they've
are you opening up for other bands right now?
that's logically where I would be right now. It would be very surprising for me. I mean, unless somebody was really willing to take a gamble and really loved me, to make me a headliner. I just don't think that it would be easy to justify that, because I can't guarantee a huge turnout. If you combine my friends and the draw of everybody in my band, who they're all friends of mine, they're all professional working musicians, and we kind of sat down and we did a tally, and we think, okay, between all of us, we could probably tell a venue consistently 15 tickets. We can say we'll bring 15 people in through the door, and then we'll market, we'll push, we'll do whatever we can to get more people in. But we need to be working with a venue that also does their own promotion as well. They wouldn't be leaving all of that up to me. And it's tricky. And a lot of venues just aren't willing to take a chance. Even as an opening act, it's easier. I'm not at a point where I would go to a venue and say, "Hey, make me your headliner."
Yeah.
But even then, as an opening act, you have to be somewhat proven, and, there's just not enough data on us yet, and a lot of that data, if you don't have a lot of shows under your belt where you have that data, you can only point to things like metrics, like, "Okay, this one song of mine, the music video was received very well. 1.1 million people have viewed it." That's what YouTube is telling me. And a lot of it is just, you have to get your songs on playlists on it's all this kind of digital, it's this kind of digital pay to play nightmare, that the industry has
Hmm.
changed so much. And you have to say, okay, well, you haven't heard me, but X many people are streaming my songs. And it's like, that's kind of your CV. It's your little resume. You can say, okay, well, you don't know who I am, but people do like my music, I swear. And so
For sure.
it's hard, it's disheartening, and so every once in a while I'll just listen to Shine. I'll be like, I'm gonna be okay. It's gonna be okay. It's gonna, in the end, well, at some point it'll all come into place, but you just got to keep working at it. It's exhausting, especially when you're balancing a day job. I would love to someday be at a point where I don't need the day job. That's
Hmm.
always the dream. Let's make a living on music 100%. And that's just, that's not really realistic for any of the musicians I know, but that's the dream, to not have to be an accountant.
Yeah.
And yeah.
We get to track 6.
Hmm.
This is Lady Gaga,
Hmm.
Alejandro.
Yeah, so this was, that's off of a Fame Monster, if I believe, her second big, record. That's
It's
the
from
one that Bad
2009.
Yeah, that's the one that Bad Romance was on. Bad Romance is also a brilliant song. I love Bad Romance. Tim, my partner, says that Bad Romance is one of the best pop songs. He thinks it's the best pop song of the 21st century. He's he's a big Lady Gaga fan, which is funny. If you saw him, you wouldn't expect that. But um, you know, but Alejandro in particular, I don't want to say I was resistant to her, but when she was first coming out, and that was in her kind of performance art phase, and she was showing up, to events wearing dresses made out of meat or whatever, and I was just kind of like, what is her? I find her exhausting already, and I haven't even heard her music. And then Bad Romance was everywhere, and there was a part of me that was very begrudgingly like, okay, that's a good pop song. So I don't want to be won over by her, And then Alejandro came out, and I think that was what flipped it for me. Some of it is because I listened to it and I was like, oh, uh, this sounds like an Ace of Base song, which, takes me right back to my childhood. And I was just kind of like, okay, she's clearly pulling from a touchstone that I remember. And then it's just again, it was one of those moments where I listened to it and I was like, she knows how to write a fantastic pop song. And
Mhm.
that is a hard skill. It's one thing to write a good song. It's another thing to write a song that's a great pop song that's going to be on the radio and everybody's going to be singing it and everybody's going to be saying, for the most part, that is a great song. And, Bad Romance almost won me over, but I was still just kind of like, "Oh, but that's the girl who showed up wearing meat at that event, and I'm not." And then Alejandro came out, and lyrically, it's kind of a funny song. It's like a little telenovela, like, storyline in the song. It's, like, she's juggling different lovers, and it's kind of a comical little story. It's very whimsical, but it's also just a great pop song, and I was like, "Okay, now I'm a Lady Gaga fan." That's it. So,
It's got a bit of ABBA influence, and I might be
uh,
the only one, but it kind of, when I first heard it, because I hadn't heard this one by her. I've heard some of her other songs, but it almost had a little bit of a Madge influence as well. Um,
yes.
and
Yep.
so I was kind of like, hang on, but I think that was maybe a nod, but it's probably the ABBA, because obviously Madonna was very influenced by ABBA with a lot of her stuff. So I
Yeah.
think that's also, she's borrowing from the same well in
Yep.
terms of Ace of Base and ABBA and things like that. But
Yeah,
she's
absolutely.
she's grown to like she's she's grown on me as well. I'm not saying I'm a big fan, but there are a couple of songs that I really like, and one guest had picked a song which was quite new, one of her new
Mhm.
songs, which I think I've heard it on the radio here in France, but it got some sample or something of Susie and the Banshees. So
Oh, okay.
that Abra back or something like that,
Oh,
or
Abracadabra. Yeah, yeah.
yeah.
Yeah, I know that song. Yeah, yeah.
So that kind of gave me a little bit more, gave her some more street cred in my mind, even though she doesn't need my credibility. But
Right.
because of Susie the Banshees, which I'm a big fan of them, so it was interesting when I kind of like that nod she did with that. And the song is actually really good, and I think
Yeah.
she has a great voice, so you can't
Yes.
knock
Yeah.
some of her theatrics, but I think in regards to just the songs and when you break them down, I think there's
Yeah.
quite a like special she's
Yeah.
musician.
Yeah. Yeah. No, she definitely knows how to, and then she's somebody who, um, I think she's actually a decent actress as well. Like I don't think that's something that she necessarily set out to do in her career, but she sort of stumbled into it. I think she's very good in A Star Is Born, and obviously that set her on a little
Mhm.
bit of a path. And she's quite funny. I mean, I've seen her. She hosted Saturday Night Live a couple of times. She seems to have a pretty good sense of humor about herself. I love that about celebrities. I'm like, if a celebrity doesn't take themselves seriously, I like them infinitely more,
Yeah,
just on principle, because that means that they're not letting the fame get to their head. They can take a
exactly.
joke. They can make fun of themselves, and that just makes them more human and less, you know, oh, I'm better than you, that kind of feeling.
um your voice, tell me who does people compare your voice to, or who do they think you sound like, or do you get any kind of similarities or
I'll
to
I'll
that?
tell you what I've heard, and they're gonna sound wild because it depends on who you talk to.
Okay.
My dad's friends, this is wildly inaccurate, but to the point where it's kind of almost endearing. My dad's friends, not necessarily listening to my original music, but they've heard me do covers. They often say, "Oh, she sounds like Joan Baez." I don't.
Okay.
I really, really, really don't. Joan Baez has got, her voice is much higher. It's a very different tenor. I love her. Nothing wrong with Joan Baez. It's great. It's not correct, but again, I'm like I'm saying this. It depends on who you talk to. Um, I uh, Luke, my collaborator, he produced these two albums as well. He was mixing one, and apparently his mother walked by. He was visiting his mother, and he was working, kind of at his portable mixing station. And his mother walked by and said, "Oh, she sounds a little bit like Chrissy Hind." So I've gotten
Okay.
that. I can see. I've People have told me Pat Benatar. I can kind of see that. Um, I've heard Alanis Morissette. I don't know if that's 100% accurate. I think that might be more about lyrical content as opposed to sound of my voice.
Mhm.
Um, Fiona Apple gets thrown at me a lot, and it's because I think it's just because we both have a lower register. We're both kind of, you can probably tell from my speaking voice, but also when I sing, I'm an alto. I sing fairly. I've got a decent range, but my sweet spot is in that kind of Fiona Apple zone. So I think, if you were to ask me, that's probably my, not necessarily my vocal doppelganger, but I think that would be the closest. But it was one of those things where my friend James, who I write with, his girlfriend Kara, we were talking once about, I was like, I was kind of chuckling. I was like, why do all my dad's friends think I sound like Joan Baez? That makes no sense to me whatsoever. And James was pulling up all these Joan Baez songs, and he was like, yep, that doesn't sound like you. That doesn't sound like you. Basically saying your dad's friends are crazy. And his girlfriend Kara said, this is a stupid conversation. You sound like you. You sound
Yeah.
like Reeya. And I was like, oh wow, that's I love that she said that. And so there's a part of me that holds on to that. It's just a very sweet thing for her to say. So that's something that I hang on to.
No, because when I was listening to you, the first couple of songs when we first connected to have you on
Mhm.
the show, I remember hearing, I was like, I'm trying to pinpoint it. I couldn't really. Like, sometimes you say, oh, they have a very influenced by so and so. Like the guitar riff, I kind of
Sure,
got
sure.
that
Yeah. Yeah.
nod to you too. But with your voice, it was really interesting. Whereas I'm thinking, it was weird because and I forget her name. Is it Grace Slick from Jefferson Starship?
Oh yeah. 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 Graceland. Yeah.
So that kind of like came into my head, and I'm like, I don't know, but again, I'm not a big fan of them. I just know her
Mhm.
voice. It's quite unique, and it's why maybe I'm put in comparison because your voice sounded quite different. Now, if you don't mind me telling you, one of my friend's neighbor who heard you when I was in the car the other day, and I was playing one of your songs. He actually said that your voice sounded like the singer from Rush, which is obviously a
No, that's
man.
crazy.
Yeah,
Oh
and
my God.
I was
Oh,
like,
this is,
hang on a second. I was like, but his
oh,
voice
wow.
is so high pitched and kind of a little bit feminine in a way.
Yeah.
So it kind of made sense to me that he could draw a comparison to that. So I was like, okay, well, I don't know how she would react to that because, comparing maybe Joan Baez is one thing, but having this, I forget, I don't
Getty
know the
Lee,
guy's name from Rush, but
it's Getty Lee. No, you're gonna laugh because Rush is a band who I think individually, all four of them are brilliant musicians, just very, very brilliant musicians. As a band, I really don't like them. I told you I like most music. That is the one band that I'm just like, nope,
we
nope.
found it.
Yeah, if Rush song comes on the radio, I'm changing it over. If a Rush song, if I've got Spotify on shuffle, Rush, we're skipping it. And it's
Musically,
mostly,
vocally, what's your
I
dislike to
think
them?
I just think the lyrics are dumb. It's really
Mm.
it's really just the lyrics are dumb, and then there are, Geddy Lee, his singing to me is
Getty Lee, that's right.
some of it is good. Some of his singing is good, and then some of it is like when he gets into that really, really high register, it's a little too like a cat squeaking or something like that. I'm not saying I'm insulted. I'm actually quite tickled by that comparison because it's funny
Oh,
because
I wouldn't have thought that. I wouldn't have come into my
yeah,
head.
yeah, yeah. No,
So
it cracks me up because I was just kind of like, oh, of all the people to be compared to, it's this one band that I'm like, no, I will never listen to them. But to be fair, they're Geddy Lee is a brilliant bass player. I'm a bass player. I think he's immensely talented. Everybody in that band is just so good. It's just a shame that that I just don't care for the and it's the lyrics. It's the lyrics more than anything else. I just think their lyrics are kind of stupid. If the
uh,
lyrics were better, I might have a different opinion, but it's just I can't get past the lyrics. And
but the Chrissy Hine comment or kind of said there's somebody said Chrissy Hine that you sounded
yeah,
similar. I actually think that's quite a good
yeah.
mostly because maybe I noticed a little bit like of an androgynous sound to your voice. So
Yeah,
that
yeah,
Chrissy Hine obviously has that. She's that really that rocker, but she, she's very delicate, but also quite tough. And
yeah,
so that's
yeah,
kind of maybe I can see that comparison the way that
yeah,
I heard your voice, just
yeah.
without seeing
No,
you,
no, no, I mean,
just hearing
yeah,
it in like on Spotify and not trying to put a person and everything, just a voice and the
yeah.
music together.
No, I mean, I think that's a good description. Just the way you put it, that's kind of how I would describe it as well. Is that it's delicate, but it's tough. I'm not, I don't have like an ethereal voice that floats over the, I'm not Billie Eilish. I'm not, that's not the vocal world I live in. So yeah, no, I think that's a really great way of putting it. Is like it's delicate, but it's tough, and I think that's yeah, no, that's accurate. I love that you said that. That's good. I'm gonna hang on to that.
Well, we could delete the Rush bit. No.
No, 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 you
Um,
can, no, keep that in there. It's fun. It's so funny to me. I I don't like Rush, but I love that somebody made that comparison because it's hysterical. You don't have to cut that out. That's funny. I when Tim gets home from work, I'm gonna tell him and he's gonna fall on the floor laughing because he's gonna be like, that's hysterical.
we get to track 7. This is Brandy Carlisle, The Story. Now, I'm
Mhm.
going to be honest. I don't know much about, I might be the only person in the world that doesn't know much about Brandy Carlisle. I'm not that familiar with it, but I obviously heard this song in particular.
She's somebody who I've come to very recently. She's been around for a long time, but she's somebody who I came to very, very recently. She has a new album actually out right now. She was just the musical guest on Saturday Night Live. But speaking of Saturday Night Live, first heard this song. It's funny. This song is actually quite old. I want to say this song is from 2008 or something, but
2007. Yeah.
2007. And I didn't know it then because I wasn't really aware of her then. But she was a musical guest on Saturday Night Live a couple of years ago, um, maybe 2 or 3 years ago. And she performed this song on Saturday Night Live, and it was the first time I had heard the song. And it was just a really incredible performance. She has incredible stage presence. She's very charismatic. She's got just a huge, huge voice.
Mhm.
Um, and the it's called The Story, and the whole premise of the song is, I've been through a lot, I've seen a lot, I've gone through good times, I've gone through bad times, but, what makes everything worthwhile is I can tell the story to you. It's to a lover, to a partner, a lover, whatever. And so it's very sweet in that regard, but it's also just, it's got this, especially in the middle section, just this huge searing, she's belting and there's a huge, guitar solo, and it's a rocker, and then it kind of gets quiet again, and it's just, it has kind of an arc, and it has a crescendo, and then it kind of, gets quiet again. And so I think, structurally, the arc of the song just sonically is very good. But a lot of it, I would say that song, what I love about that song, I listen to it now just on its own, but, it was that live performance in particular on
Mhm.
Saturday Night Live where I was just kind of like, "Why have I not been paying attention to her?" I know her name. I know she's been around for a while.
Yeah.
Uh, and she's won awards and stuff like that. She's just never really been on my radar, and I saw that performance, and I was like, "Why have I not been paying attention to her?" So that's, so I include her on my list as somebody um who came to me quite late, but not late, like, and then tomorrow I'm gonna disappear off the earth, and not, but like kind of late in the game in terms of, understanding my own musical influences. And, I think the kind of storytelling she does in her song is of a piece with, like what Bruce Springsteen does. It's not entirely Bruce Springsteen, but she's coming from that tradition of, these aren't just sort of generic, I'm gonna put some words that sound pleasing together, and, and that's the song. She's a storyteller herself. I respond very well to, you know, um artists who are storytellers, because that's how I approach my own music.
Mhm.
Um, so yeah, she's somebody who, and she's got that kind of roots Americana, which is again not
A
really
bit of
my.
raspy voice.
But yeah, and it's a genre of music that I have a lot of friends who kind of play like roots rock Americana, which is sort of it's folk adjacent. It almost sounds country, but it's not country. But it's very, very grounded and very down to earth.
Hmm.
And so I appreciate that about her. And then she's somebody who just her influences, I've seen her give interviews and she said that Elton John is one of her huge influences, which is
Yeah.
just again when you think about what she does and what he does, and they've toured together. I think they did a record together recently, and
Maybe
so
that's how I heard her name through
through
something
the
with Elton
yeah,
John.
through the Elton John, yeah, and then, yeah, it's just it's one of those things where you hear, who are your musical influences, and you're talking this kind of roots rock, country adjacent artist, and she goes, "Elton John," and you're just kind of like, "Oh, okay." So I like hearing other artists' inspirations and being surprised by them, and then,
Hmm.
going back and listening to the music and saying, "Well, where do I hear the Elton in here? Is there a smidgen of Elton that I can pick out?" Because it's just fun to do that. So, she's got an interesting background, and again, just a very, very, very compelling live performer. I would love to see her. Seeing her live on TV is one thing. I would love to see her play live. If she ever
Hmm.
comes to the New York area, I would absolutely go and see her perform.
We come to track 8. Now you
Mhm.
mentioned obviously Eminem earlier, and
Mhm.
so this song you picked is what's this off of his 2002? Lose
Mhm.
Yourself.
As yourself, yeah. Um, Probably one of his most famous songs, if maybe not his, maybe the most famous song. He
Is it
won an
from the
Oscar.
film?
It's from the film 8 Mile,
Yeah,
yeah.
8 Miles. Okay.
And he won an Oscar for it, which I don't think he was expecting because he didn't even show up at the awards ceremony.
No.
Um, uh, this is a song, again, meaningful on a few different levels. First and simplest, when I was in high school and I was a theater kid, we used to this is such a motivational, like, lyrically it's about, I'm gonna this is my chance, this is my shot, I've got to take it. When I was in high school doing theater, we used to put this song on in the dressing room before every single theater performance we did and just kind of listen to it, pump ourselves up to get ready to go on stage. As I've gotten older, I listen to it before job interviews. I listen to it before now, I listen to it before every single any show, any gig I do on my own. I listen to it just to kind of get myself into that frame of mind of like, this is it. This is your moment. This is the moment where you're going to go and give 110% of yourself because this is your moment to show who you are. And
Hmm.
then lyrically, we want to talk, as I was talking about the way he constructs his lyrics. What's cool to me about this song is that the first portion of the song, he is performing as his character in the film, whose name is it's obviously it's based on his life, but his character's name is Rabbit.
Yeah.
And it's about, his he's about to go into a rap battle and he's, nervous and he's trying to psych himself up. And then what's fascinating about this song is about halfway through it flips over and it becomes meta commentary, and now he's not singing as Rabbit in the movie. He's singing as Eminem, and he's, obviously it's because the movie is about his life. Now he's it becomes a parallel, and he goes, that it suddenly turns into there's no
Oops,
movie.
it goes reality.
Exactly, yeah, there's no movie, there's no Mekhi Phifer, who's the actor who was in the film. This is my life, and these times are so hard, and, trying to balance being a father and being a rap star, and it becomes like a meta commentary about the film and about him acting in a film about his own life and about what his life looks like now, and it's just I just think it's such a cool trick of songwriting is to
Hmm.
have it be about the film and the character, and it's the anthem for that character, and then you just flip it on its side and it turns into a story about something else. And I just think that is just such a brilliant twist in that song, and just says so much about, his just his imagination and his creativity, that he didn't just make it, okay, this is just going to be a character song. I'm the character of Rabbit and this is Rabbit's song. He turns it from, the fictional story into his own life, halfway through. And,
Yeah.
he does it almost seamlessly. All of a sudden you're like, oh, he's not singing about the movie anymore. And it's
It's
just
almost
fascinating.
like Eminem's A Day in the Life.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah. That's a good comparison. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
And then again, it's got a good beat. It's got a good it pumps you up, makes you wanna go out there and do your best. So, I'm not joking when I say it's not just before performances. I listen to it. If I have a job interview that I'm really, really worried about, or we're not worried, but if I'm really nervous about, I'll put that on in the radio or in the car before I walk in.
It's probably one of my well, favorite songs by him, but I mean there's a couple of others that are maybe less popular. But I do like his um truth. He is
Yes.
a truth teller and he's raw and he doesn't care. It's like I think he's got this he doesn't have a filter. So he will
Mm.
kind of speak and say things that you're like, oh, and where he shares publicly about personal things with his family or his mother or things like that. But yet his in just a little I know about him because I'm not like a fanatic in terms of his story or his background, but things how he shared and things you see, he doesn't try to come across like he likes to be out of the spotlight in a lot of
Yeah.
ways, but
Yeah.
let him the craft of his music and his writing and what he says speak for itself. And I think that's
Yeah.
why he gets a lot of respect from a lot of rappers that
Yeah.
are either his peers or new upcoming. um Probably one of the most respected white rappers in a genre
I
that's not
would say
necessarily
so.
should be your thing. I think
Right.
they do probably give him a lot of respect and
I think so, yeah.
actually influenced by his stuff.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I've heard a number of rappers who say that right now. They would say that he's probably the best MC, the best rapper who's out there in the world still putting music out right now. Yeah, no, and you're correct. That is something that I like about him too, is that, he hasn't gone Hollywood. He still lives in Detroit. He still cares about his hometown, and he's not really interested in playing the fame game, and he certainly could. You know
Hmm.
certainly he's got enough money, he's got enough attention, but I think he likes making music, he likes writing, and he likes, you know uh, especially now that he's kind of gotten his mental health together, and he wants to be a good parent. And that's like, especially the most recent album that he put out is a lot about, him talking about regrets he's had about moments when he's not been his best self and therefore not been able to be a good father to his children. And I think that's something that seems to be very important to him. And I think that I respect
Yeah.
that's his priority, not becoming, the most famous rapper in the world, but
No.
being a good father is very important to him. And I find that to be very, again, I respect it. It's very sweet. It's just makes him human.
True. For sure. We get to track 9. This is George Michael, Freedom, the 90s version.
Mhm. Yeah, yeah. As opposed to I think Wham had a song called Freedom, so that's why he had
Mhm.
to he had to stick the little 90 at the end. Uh, this is This is just a great song in general, a pop song. It's also, I don't know if you're familiar with the music video, but, it's kind of him, uh, you know, eh, that image of him when the song Faith came out with the leather jacket and the jukebox, and that was a very MTV manufactured image of who they wanted him to be post Wham. And
Mm.
this song is very much, this is him kind of trying to reclaim himself and saying that's not actually who I am. And so he doesn't actually appear in the music video for this song. He had a bunch of like famous models like Cindy Crawford and Tyra, or not Tyra Banks, Cindy Crawford, Naomi Campbell, um,
I think
Uh,
Christy Turlington was in it, and
yes, yeah, yeah, yeah.
I do recall it now, but I don't remember the whole video, but I do
Yeah,
somewhat
I mean,
vividly.
it's basically he got all of these models to do the lip syncing for him. He doesn't appear in the video at all. It's
Hmm.
kind of all about, it's this idea of image and, and then like he literally blows up the leather jacket from the Faith video. He blows up the jukebox and he's saying that the message is, it's basically there's someone I forgot to be. I need to be myself. I don't belong to you, you don't belong to me, and that was an MTV manufactured image of me, and that's not who I think I am, and I'm reclaiming that. And so again, a fantastic pop song just on its merits as a song. I like the messaging, and this is also a song that uh I was listening to a lot. A few years back, I went through a very bad period mental health wise. I had a pretty severe mental health crisis. I had to. I ended up having to quit my job and pursue a intensive outpatient mental health program, just in
Hmm.
order to kind of get my head straight. Um, at that point, my mental health had been kind of taking a dive for several years at that point, and then I hit a very bad low. And it was one of those, you do this or you might not survive kind of situations. You quit your job and you have to do this. That's what my psychiatrist told me. This is I'm referring you to this facility. I can't make you go, but I'm telling you right now that if you don't do something, there's only so much I can help you with. So and a lot of once I got to that program and I was in the facility, a lot of what I had to kind of overcome is feeling um, feeling like I was defined by my mental health struggles. Like not even like I was a real person, but like, oh, that is Reeya who has
Right.
mental health problems. That is Reeya who has bipolar depression, who is, she was suicidal that's feeling
That
like
was
that
like a
is
tag next to your name.
exactly, exactly. That's it's like it's not like that's Reeya the accountant. That's Reeya who likes to play rock and roll music. It's like that this is Reeya who is sick, who is
Right.
sick in the head, who's not well. And feeling like that was my definition, especially because a lot of people who were close to me had seen kind of me going down that path. And some people tried to help, some people, not that they didn't try to help, maybe they didn't realize how bad it was. I lost a few friends along the way, not necessarily always because I treated them poorly, but because, I mean, there's one friend in particular, I feel very sad that I kind of, not that we don't talk anymore, but he tried to help me, but I was kind of in such a self-destructive uh, path at a certain point, and he was trying to help me kind of pull me back from making those decisions, and I wasn't listening to him, and I was kind of continuing on this path, and I think he got to a point where he had to put some distance between me and him because it was just getting too hard for him to watch that, knowing that he couldn't pull me back from it. I'm in a much better place now, obviously. This is that version of me is gone. Is kind of what this song is about, actually, to me. But and I'm not. I'm still friendly with that person. He's in a band. I'm friends with everybody in that band. He's somebody who's always going to be somebody I think of as someone who's very important to me. But that I don't think that friendship is ever going to be fully recovered. We'll never
Hmm.
get back what we had before, and that's something that I have to just sort of accept and live with. But that's in that category of like, oh my God, I feel like I'm always going to be defined by this period of my life. And so this again, this messaging of this song, Freedom 90, is George Michael saying, I refuse to be defined by, like the pretty boy in the leather jacket singing, shaking my ass and singing
Yeah,
Faith.
yeah, for sure.
I don't want to be defined as the guy from Wham, and I'm me, and I'm finding who I am outside of that context, and this is who I'm choosing to be, and this is the statement I'm making. And so that song for me it's a similar vein as me saying, okay, I'm going to stop feeling like I am defined by what happened to me when I had a nervous breakdown. There is much more to me than that. And that this song is a reminder of that to me. And the song is also like, as for me, it's like, it's for George Michael, it was a reclamation of who he really felt he really was. And I listened to it, and it kind of, for me, it when I and this song has been around forever. I knew it, but I kind of rediscovered it during that period of time when I was in recovery and I was doing that program, and I was like, oh, this really feels very, it's ringing very true to some of the stuff that I'm working through in this therapy program that I'm in, of just reclaiming who I was, who I feel I am outside of that label. And
Yeah.
that label isn't necessarily a label that people put on me. That is a label that I was putting on myself as well. So it's kind of a little bit about telling myself to stop being mean to myself.
Yeah.
So,
Do you think there should be more awareness of mental? I mean, because I think mental health is an important topic, and I think it should be more broader to the public to be aware. Because I think so many people suffer from mental health issues, as well as people who they know, and some are,
mhm.
more severe, some are. But I think it's still a bit of kind of hidden. People don't
Yes.
want to make it more. I think now you see people talking about PTSD, and they're actually letting this be a little bit more visible. Whereas
Mhm.
before it was very hidden, whether it was military or other types of PTSD. So I think
Mhm.
mental health in general, I feel like people are still not comfortable
Yeah.
bringing this more like
Yeah, I
awareness.
think it's incredibly important. And actually, my first album, The Way Up, came. We started writing it just after I was finished with that program, and I was kind of fully in, like, not full recovery. Recovery is healing, and recovery is not linear. There's fits and starts. I'm in a much better place now than I was then, but you have high moments and low moments. But coming out of that program, I started, working with Luke, and we were talking about, well, what do you want? What do you want this album to be about? And that was what I wanted it to be about. I wanted to talk about, um, you know, how I got to, how I got to that low and how I pulled myself out of it. So, I mean,
Yeah.
the album is literally called The Way Up. One of the song in the main song in the record is The Way Up, and it is the narrative of, the downfall and the beginning of the recovery period. That album, I refer it's kind of a joke now, but it's not a funny, well, I don't know if it's a funny joke. I think of that album as the mental health album.
Hmm.
It's very much about, just different aspects of, um, struggling with mental illness and recovery, and interrogating a little bit, like, things that I did that were self-destructive. Like, I was, drinking a little bit too much. It's hard when you're friends with a bunch of musicians. Musicians tend to party hard. So, at a certain
Hmm.
point, everybody knew that I was overdoing it because everybody's kind of in that mode anyway. But drinking too much, and then also, issues with codependency, issues with, trying to be too many things to too many people because you're a people pleaser, and you're afraid that if everybody doesn't love you, that means that you have no worth. Those are some of the themes that came up in that song. Or in that record. There's one song that's a little bit about the program I was in, was specializing in dialectical behavioral therapy. That was the therapy mode that they were using,
Hmm.
which is a little bit different from talk therapy. It's a little bit more skills based. We did talk in that program. It was a group setting, but it was about, learning tools for emotional self-regulation, so that you can kind of, if you're starting to spin out, you're starting to spiral, you're starting to go down a bad road, you can stop it before you get to a point where you're making destructive choices or you fall into a huge depressive hole. So there's a song on that record called Don't Look Down, which, on first glance, it's the one song that when we play it live, sometimes we'll see people dancing to it, which is great. Um, but that song kind of is secretly about, how it's kind of, it's got about, it's got allusions to dialectical behavioral therapy in it, about, kind of balance and, there's chaos, and then there's how you ground yourself, and here's, and so it's kind of a big giant extended metaphor for
Mhm.
DBT. And it makes people dance, so that's cool. So yeah, so that's a long way of answering your question, which is yes, I think it is important I think it's important to keep talking about it, and put it more in front of people's eyes. And when I did that, as it was my very first record of original music, and I said, this is the statement I want to make coming out of the gate as my first original body of work, is, this, not just because I've just come out of it, but because it's important. And I feel like, if one person can listen to a song on that record and feel heard and feel like, okay, this is speaking to me, and they're struggling, and it helped them in some way, either because it gave them an epiphany or it just made them feel less alone, then then I've succeeded at something. So yeah, and I just think it's definitely becoming less taboo to talk about, for sure, than it was
Yeah,
maybe when I was in high school, or younger. But it still is, it's still tricky, and there are still people who will judge, or who will be frightened, or who don't,
like walk away.
yeah, there's stereotypes of, people who, you hear certain diagnoses, and you think, oh my God, that person must be crazy, they must be dangerous, or whatever. And then, you've that stigma is still there. And again, the only way to remove the stigma is to talk about it, and to normalize talking about it, and to
Mhm.
hear from people who are living with it. It's a chronic condition. It's an illness. It's not a character flaw,
Yeah.
and so that's the way we need to reframe the conversation around it.
We now go to your 10th track. You take us home with The Boss, a
Mhm.
very close neighbor to where you are currently,
Yep. Yep.
Bruce Springsteen, Land of Hope and Dreams. This is the live version from Madison Square Gardens from 2000.
Yeah. There was any number of Bruce Springsteen songs I could have picked. I could have given you 10 songs that were Bruce Springsteen songs, but then I think you would have been very frustrated with me. Um, I love Thunder Road. I have the last line from Thunder Road like tattooed on my forearm. Bruce is a huge touchstone for me, even before I moved to Jersey. Um, this song in particular I picked because the album that just came out is, again, like, we talked about it a little bit. It's 9 songs. It's about 9 places that I've called home, and the overall, kind of premise of the album, it is an album that's meant to be listened through end to end. I don't know if people still do that these days, but that's my hope. And the idea of it is, it's a little bit, the arc is, I moved around a lot as a child, and then I found a place for myself in New York in the Hudson Valley, and kind of, tried a few different versions of myself there, and then found what felt like home there. And then the last song, as you mentioned, Upstate Rust, is about a decision to, so it's got that U2 influence. It's got that kind of, grounded adult, we're in this together thing, but it's also about, me making a conscious choice to displace myself after a childhood of displacement, and an adulthood trying to heal the wounds that displacement left on me. And then, so it's a happy song. It's a U2 arena rock song. It's got a little bit of a melancholy undertone to it. But the whole premise of the album is about, what constitutes home, and how you find your home. And so this song in particular, it's a little, you think about your classic Bruce Springsteen songs that people might have put on their list, Thunder Road, Born to Run, any number of those. This is one of his more recent ones. I think it's off of Wrecking Ball, which is
Mhm.
not an album I particularly care for, big picture. It's not one of his stronger albums, but this song is, a song that I was listening to a lot when we were in the process of moving upstate. I have a very vivid memory of, we were, driving up, we were in 2 cars. So Tim was in one car with the dog, I was in the other car with the cat, and we were driving up north, and we hadn't found a place to live yet, so we were staying in Tim works in hospitality. Was the director of finance at a resort in southern Vermont, actually, just over the border from where we ended up living. And so we were going to stay in the hotel until we found a place to live. We ended up living in the hotel for 3 months with the dog and cat, which was not, I don't
Oh
recommend
wow.
that. It's terrible.
Oh God.
It was not fun.
Yeah.
But I just remember we were driving up there, and it was summer and it was really beautiful outside. And it is a very, very beautiful part of New York State. It's a very beautiful part of the country. It's just very, very quiet and bucolic in a way that's just not for a city person. It's just a little bit too much. But that song is also about, it's about the lyrics are, like, I'll stand by your side, I'll provide for you, I'll be your companion on this ride. It's very much of a pace with, we're in this together, and we have faith in each other, and we're going to find a place that's, land of hope and dreams is very, very lofty, but the idea is it's a song about coming home. And
Yeah.
when we got up there, by that point, my first album had come out. And then Luke came to me and said, "So, what do you want the second album to be about?" And I said, "Funny you should ask. This is a very half-baked idea. I don't really know. I didn't really have an idea of how we were going to approach it, but I said, I'm going to give you a song to listen to." And I sent him that version of the song. And I said, while you kind of immerse yourself in that, I'm going to try to turn my half-baked idea into something that makes sense. And, I sent him that song, and then I kind of came up with, like, oh, maybe like several, songs about a different city or a different place or whatever. And here's the arc. So that song is kind of the foundation. It's sort of the emotional DNA of this record that I just put out. And I'm very, very proud of this record that's out there right now. It's the best work I've ever done. And I'm really happy that, people seem to like it. It's being well received. And so you know, it's I do really love this Bruce Springsteen song. And now it's one of those things where it doesn't just remind me of, those moments where we were making the decision to go, and the experience of actually driving up there, driving away from home, and driving to whatever we were going to decide home was next. But now it also kind of has, again, so many of these songs that I've given you have multiple meanings. And so now it's also, I listen to it now and I think, oh, okay, this song is important to me because it is the genesis of the creative work that I'm the most proud of right now, that I have
Yeah.
put out myself. So there you have it.
Well, Reeya, thank you so much for sharing your 10 tracks. I mean, Bruce Springsteen does mean a lot to a lot of people, and I think he's got such a his just what he does and what he's done for so many years is just I mean, I don't love every song by him, but I just got into him through different channels, and really it's hard to not appreciate, his
Yeah.
storytelling and the way that he writes songs. And so I'm a big fan. Um, for people to get in touch with you, what's the best way for them to connect with you?
The best way for them to connect with me would be, I'm on Instagram a great deal. My handle there is at Reeya B Music. I also am fairly active on Threads, which is sort of the Wild West of, yeah, I think it's kind of it's an odd little platform of, it's kind of Twitter, but without crazy people, and you can kind of go a little long form. So I do some album. So if you want, like, to up to date what I'm doing, music wise, and performances and show dates and stuff, you'll get a lot of that on Instagram. You'll also, my website, reeyabanerjee.com, all of that is up to date there too. If you want to get a little bit more of unfiltered thoughts that I have late at night about random things, not necessarily just music, but here's what I think about James Bond films, or here's what I think about this particular era of Bollywood, or here's what I think about Better Call Saul. Sometimes it's just whatever's on my mind late at night. Sometimes I'll, so you can get a peek into the other parts of my brain, for better or for worse. And so I think those are two good places to find me. My music is on any streaming service of your choice. Spotify is great. I think a lot of people use Spotify, but it's on Apple Music, it's on Amazon, it's on Pandora, it's on all the good stuff. If you want to actually go to purchase the music, reeyabanerjee.bandcamp.com. You can purchase it digitally. I also have CDs. I don't know if anybody listens to CDs anymore, but I have CDs for sale, and I actually just got. I took the plunge. I put This Place on vinyl, and the vinyl records just
Wow, cool.
arrived. So those are going to be available on my Bandcamp page as well. So I've been collecting vinyl. Vinyls come back and become trendy again. So if there are any vinyl enthusiasts out there and you want to have my record on vinyl, stay tuned. It'll probably be today's Tuesday. I'm hoping to have it up and ready to go to sell by Friday.
That's great.
So very excited about that. So yeah, I would say, but if you want the day-to-day, most up to date, just find me on Instagram or on Threads. And then, that will point you elsewhere, wherever you need to be. If I want you to go to Bandcamp, or if I want you to go to Spotify, or if I want you to go to YouTube, I will direct you from Instagram. So.
Reeya, thank you so much for being my guest and sharing your 10 tracks. It was a great journey to have you share with us. We're honored. And to say goodbye to